The trolley problem serves as an ancient yet perpetually relevant mirror held up to the human conscience. When we first encounter the dilemma of the runaway trolley, the initial impulse for most is a cold mathematical calculation. If the tracks are destined to claim 5 lives, and we have the power to reduce that toll to a single soul, the arithmetic of survival seems to demand action. It is a logic built upon the maximization of well-being, where the value of a life is weighed against the collective outcome of a tragic event. In those first few seconds of contemplation, we are all amateur mathematicians of morality. We intuitively grasp that 5 people represent a greater repository of potential, relationships, and lived experiences than one. By shifting the lever, we are not necessarily choosing death, we are choosing the lesser of two irreparable evils. This consequentialist framework is compelling because it provides a clear, actionable path forward. It replaces the paralyzing grip of helplessness with the agency of decision-making, promising that we can mitigate the absolute destruction of a catastrophe through rational, detached intervention. However, this rational facade begins to crack the moment we change the environmental variables. The shift from the driver's seat to the onlooker's bridge is not merely a change in scenery, it is a fundamental transformation of our relationship with the act of killing. When we are tasked with pushing a person, a living, breathing individual, into the path of a machine, the abstract math of utility suddenly feels like a moral transgression. The physical nature of the act, the use of our own hands, introduces a visceral repulsion that no amount of calculation can easily suppress. We find ourselves caught in a trap where our intellectual approval of saving 5 conflicts with our moral aversion to direct, intentional harm. This is the heart of the documentary's inquiry. Why does the same net result feel so different when the method of achieving it changes? Our hesitation on the bridge suggests that we do not view moral life solely through the lens of outcomes. We carry an innate, perhaps evolutionary, resistance to treating other human beings as mere components in a mechanical equation, regardless of how many lives might be saved by their sacrifice. The distinction between doing and allowing is a cornerstone of our legal and moral systems. In the first scenario, the trolley is already moving, and our intervention is seen as a redirection of a pre-existing threat. In the second, we are the architects of a new fatality. This distinction, however, is fragile. If the outcome is truly all that matters, why does the method of delivery hold so much weight in our final judgment? Perhaps it is because our moral identity is tied not just to the state of the world, but to our own integrity. When we advocate for the sacrifice of one to save 5, we are comfortable from a distance. But when that sacrifice requires our own active, bloody hands, the cost to our own moral standing becomes impossible to ignore. We fear that by pushing that man, we cease to be rescuers and become perpetrators. This fear is not irrational. It is a profound recognition that morality is not just about what we achieve, but about who we become in the process of achieving it. It is the beginning of a long, difficult conversation. The classroom participants struggled with this exact realization. They wanted to be the people who saved 5 lives, yet they could not bring themselves to be the people who shoved a stranger to their death. This is not a failure of logic. It is a manifestation of the complex, often contradictory architecture of the human mind. We are programmed for both empathy and pragmatism. When these two systems collide in the high-stakes environment of a hypothetical dilemma, the resulting sparks illuminate the fundamental friction of our moral lives. Is it possible that our morality is fundamentally messy? We crave consistency, desiring a single principle that can guide us through every crisis, yet we find ourselves intuitively rejecting that consistency the moment it feels inhumane. This paradox suggests that there is no perfect answer to the trolley problem, precisely because the problem is designed to break our reliance on simple rules. We are forced to look deeper at our values, asking ourselves what we are truly protecting when we refuse to cross certain lines. Perhaps the reluctance to push the man is not about the man himself, but about the society we wish to live in. If we establish a rule that says it is acceptable to sacrifice the innocent whenever the numbers favor the majority, we are creating a world where no individual is truly safe from the state or from their neighbor. The preservation of categorical rights, like the right not to be murdered, might be a higher form of utility than simply counting heads. It is a long-term investment in a stable, trustworthy human civilization. This perspective elevates the conversation from a simple math problem to a profound meditation on the social contract. If we lose the categorical prohibition against harming the innocent, we risk sliding into a utilitarian nightmare where any atrocity can be justified as long as the numbers work out. The heroism of 9/11 passengers is a poignant example, yet it differs from the bridge scenario. In that case, those who chose to crash the plane were themselves part of the situation, whereas the man on the bridge is an outsider dragged into a tragedy. The distinction between self-sacrifice and the sacrifice of others is paramount. When we talk about the right thing to do, we must account for the autonomy of those involved. The worker on the track and the man on the bridge have rights that are not ours to negotiate away. This is where the shift from consequentialist to categorical reasoning becomes necessary. It forces us to respect the inherent value of an individual, even when the pressure to prioritize the group is overwhelming and seemingly rational. As the discussion progressed, it became clear that the goal was not to reach a consensus, but to reveal the limitations of our own thinking. We begin with a belief like save the most people, and we end up in a labyrinth of exceptions and moral injuries. This process is unsettling. It is meant to be. The discomfort felt by the students is the sound of their own moral frameworks being tested against the harsh reality of these dilemmas. It is the birth of genuine, critical, and independent philosophical thought. The instructor's role is to keep us moving through this discomfort without providing a quick exit. He guides the students and, by extension, the audience away from the safety of their initial assumptions. He shows us that our moral intuition is not a settled doctrine but a living, breathing, and often wounded thing. By confronting these dilemmas, we are not just analyzing abstract scenarios, we are exploring the very boundaries of our own conscience and the weight of our choices in a world that is rarely black and white. Think about the emergency room scenario. The doctor who must choose between one critically ill patient and 5 moderately injured ones. Here, the utilitarian calculus feels more comfortable, more right. Why? Because it is within the scope of the doctor's professional duty to allocate limited resources. The moral burden of saving the many over the few in a triage setting is part of the job, but the organ transplant case, that is a bridge too far. That is a transgression of the most sacred medical trust. In the transplant case, we aren't just allocating resources, we're creating the need for a victim. The healthy patient is not a participant in the tragedy. He is a bystander who happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The horror we feel at the idea of harvesting his organs is the sound of our moral compass snapping back into place. We instinctively know that some things are non-negotiable, even if the result of that negotiation would be the survival of several others. This brings us to the core of the disagreement between Bentham and Kant. Bentham saw the world as a place where we could optimize happiness. Kant saw the world as a place where we must adhere to duties that transcend any specific outcome. Which perspective is more dangerous? A world without utility is a world of stagnant inaction, while a world without categories is a world of unchecked tyranny. We are tasked with navigating the tension between these two poles, knowing that both are necessary for a functional society. The documentary's structure mirrors this tension. It doesn't tell us which path to take, it shows us the consequences of each. If we choose utility, we must be prepared to face the moral horror of our actions. If we choose categorical duties, we must be prepared to accept the tragedy of letting others perish when we might have saved them. Neither option offers the comfort of a clear conscience. Both are heavy burdens that require a lifetime of contemplation, debate, and ultimately personal responsibility. As we move toward the second part of this analysis, we should reflect on the idea that these questions are unavoidable. We live the answers to these questions every day, whether we realize it or not. Every time we vote, every time we support a policy, every time we make a decision that affects the lives of others, we're acting as either a consequentialist or a keeper of categories. To be aware of this is the first step toward living a more intentional, reflective, and authentically moral life. The danger of skepticism is that it offers an easy way out. By saying, well, no one knows the truth, we absolve ourselves of the duty to struggle with these difficult questions. But as the teacher reminds us, skepticism is not a home, it is a rest stop. We cannot stay there forever. The restlessness of reason is what drives human progress. It is the engine that forces us to constantly reevaluate our laws, our customs, and our own personal morality in the face of ever-changing circumstances. We are entering a space where the familiar is made strange. The simple stories of trolley cars have become the backdrop for a much deeper examination of the self. By the end of this journey, we may not have a perfect answer to the trolley problem, but we will have a much clearer understanding of why we think what we think. We will be more aware of the principles that guide us, the biases that cloud our judgment, and the profound, unavoidable complexity of being human. Moral reasoning is rarely a linear progression from premise to conclusion. Instead, it is a recursive process, a constant back and forth between our gut reactions to specific cases and the general principles we hold dear. When we declare that it is wrong to kill an innocent person, we are articulating a categorical rule. Yet when we are faced with the prospect of saving 5 people by sacrificing that same innocent, our rule begins to fray. This friction is not a flaw in our reasoning, it is the very engine of moral growth. We see this process at work in the classroom debates. A student might start with a firm commitment to the greatest good for the greatest number, only to find that position untenable when forced to confront the implications of murder in a medical setting. This leads to a revision of their initial principle. They might then try to qualify their rule, perhaps by adding that killing is only wrong if it involves a direct act. But then they are challenged to explain why steering a trolley is any less direct than pushing a man. This is the restlessness of reason in action. We are like architects constantly redesigning a building while we are still living inside it. We want the structure to be stable, to be consistent, to be a shelter against the chaos of moral ambiguity. But every time we add a new floor, we find that the foundation is insufficient. We are forced to reinforce it, to tear down old walls, to build new rooms. It is an exhausting but essential task that defines the human intellectual experience. What we are discovering is that our moral landscape is populated by two distinct, often warring types of reasoning. The consequentialist approach is democratic and broad, seeking to improve the state of the world by looking at the aggregate outcome. The categorical approach is individualistic and rigid, seeking to protect the integrity of the person by looking at the nature of the action. Both have their virtues, and both, when taken to an extreme, lead to outcomes that most of us would find morally repulsive. If we look at history, we see the catastrophic results of both extremes. Totalitarian regimes have often justified the most heinous crimes by citing the greater good, a chilling application of utilitarianism gone mad. Conversely, strict adherence to rigid moral rules without any regard for the consequences of those rules on real people can lead to a paralyzing and heartless fanaticism. The challenge, therefore, is not to pick one side and hold it to the death, but to find a way to live in the tension between them. Classroom participants aren't just arguing, they are participating in a tradition that stretches back to the ancient Greeks. When they struggle to define what makes pushing a man on the tracks different from turning a lever, they are essentially reinventing the wheel of moral philosophy. They are realizing that there are no easy answers, and that the truth is not something we stumble upon in a moment of clarity. It is something we build, brick by brick, through debate, reflection, and most importantly, listening. The instructor's use of provocative hypotheticals, the fat man, the transplant patients, the runaway trolley, is a deliberate tactic. He's using these stories to strip away the clutter of everyday life. In the real world, our moral judgments are often masked by habit, tradition, and self-interest. We don't have to think about why we believe killing is wrong because it is rarely presented to us in a way that forces a choice. But in these stories, there is nowhere to hide. We are forced to confront our values nakedly. This is the personal risk of the course. When we see our own moral intuitions exposed, and when we see how easily they can be challenged or even destroyed, we feel a sense of loss. It is the loss of the comfortable, unquestioned certainty we had before we started thinking about these things. Once you realize that your moral principles are not as solid as you once thought, you can never go back to that blissful state of ignorance. You have been changed, and that change is permanent. But there is also a political risk. By questioning the foundations of our beliefs, we risk becoming less effective in the active life that Calicles championed. If we spend all our time debating whether it is ever right to harm one for the sake of many, do we lose the ability to make quick, decisive judgments in the heat of a real crisis? Perhaps. But the alternative is to act without reflection, to blindly follow rules that we haven't tested, and to make decisions that we might later find to be morally indefensible. Philosophy is a form of distancing. It pulls us back from the immediacy of our impulses so that we can see the broader picture. Yes, this can be debilitating in the short term. It can make us hesitate when we should act. But in the long term, it is the only way to ensure that when we do act, we're acting for reasons that can withstand the light of day. It is the difference between a reactive existence and a life of purposeful, principled action. The debate in the balcony regarding the donor scenario shows how quickly we can try to escape the difficulty of a moral dilemma through clever, albeit evasive, maneuvers. The student who suggests using the organs of one of the five to save the others is a classic example of lateral thinking. It is a brilliant way to solve the math problem, but it completely misses the point of the philosophical exercise. It is a way of saying, I don't want to deal with this, so let me change the rules. While we might laugh at the absurdity of the suggestion, it is a very human response. When we are pushed into a corner when our values are challenged, our first instinct is often to find a way out, to look for a loophole that allows us to keep our hands clean. We should be wary of this instinct. It is often our way of avoiding the truly difficult work of moral inquiry. The goal is to stay in the corner, to feel the pressure, and to see what emerges from it. As we continue, we must keep in mind that these books, Aristotle, Locke, Kant, Mill, are not just dusty relics. They are the record of other people who have felt this same restlessness of reason. They are our guides not because they have the answer, but because they have provided the best tools we have for navigating these dilemmas. They help us to name our intuitions, to structure our arguments, and to see where our reasoning breaks down. The conversation is shifting from the trolley to broader political questions: equality, affirmative action, free speech, and the role of the state. These are not just academic topics, they are the fault lines of our society. The same principles we explored in the trolley cases, utility versus rights, collective good versus individual freedom, will appear again and again in these debates. We are building the skills we need to tackle these much larger, much more consequential problems. We should be mindful of the categorical evasion of skepticism. It is easy to say, that's just your opinion, or every culture has its own values. While there is some truth to the diversity of human belief, that doesn't mean we should stop searching for better, more defensible ways of living together. The persistence of these questions across centuries and cultures suggests that they touch on something fundamental about what it means to be a human being, regardless of where or when we live. As we transition into these more complex political debates, the risk remains that we will lose our way. But that is the nature of the enterprise. We are not looking for a destination, we are looking for a better way to travel. We are trying to sharpen our minds, to refine our judgment, and to become more aware of the moral stakes of our political decisions. This is not a hobby, it is the essential work of a free and responsible citizen. The teacher's warning is not meant to discourage us but to prepare us. To do philosophy is to accept that you will be unsettled, that you will be changed, and that you will be challenged in ways you cannot anticipate. But it is also to accept that this is the only way to truly own your beliefs. If your principles have never been tested, do you really hold them, or are they just inherited habits? This course is the crucible in which we can burn away the habits and forge real principles. In this next phase, we will see how these abstract, often distant, concepts can illuminate the most pressing issues of our time. We will see how a simple question about a trolley car can lead to a deeper understanding of why we support a particular policy, or how we view the rights of our fellow citizens. We are connecting the dots between our innermost values and our outward political actions, creating a more integrated, more reflective, and more powerful way of living in the world. So let us embrace the restlessness of reason. Let us not run away from the difficult questions or the uncomfortable answers. Let us continue to push our principles to their logical limits, to listen to those who disagree with us, and to be willing to admit when our own thinking is flawed. This is the work of a lifetime, and it begins here, in the messy, challenging, and ultimately rewarding space of human inquiry. The stage is set for a deeper exploration of these ideas. We have laid the foundation by questioning our initial reactions, by identifying the conflict between utility and rights, and by recognizing the personal and political risks of this undertaking. Now we must take the next step. We must see how these tools hold up when applied to the real-world, high-stakes conflicts that define our shared existence. The story is just beginning, and we are its authors. The final part of our journey involves realizing that there is no final part. The pursuit of justice and the understanding of the good life is a continuous loop. We have examined the trolley car, the transplant surgeon, and the reluctant hero, and we have discovered that every time we think we have a solid grip on the truth, reality introduces a new variable that forces us to let go. This is not a failure of our intelligence, but a testament to the depth of our humanity. One of the most important takeaways from this inquiry is the necessity of vulnerability. To engage with political philosophy is to open yourself up to the possibility that your most deeply held beliefs might be wrong, or at least incomplete. This is a terrifying prospect, especially in a world that demands we take sides and stick to them regardless of the evidence. But the ability to say, I don't know, or I need to think more about that, is a mark of strength, not weakness. As we look at contemporary political controversies, like the debates over social justice, economic policy, or the limits of governmental authority, we can see the same patterns of reasoning we analyzed in the trolley cases. When we argue for a policy, are we relying on a utilitarian calculation of benefits, or are we defending an absolute right? Most of the time, our political rhetoric is a messy, inconsistent mix of both. Recognizing this in our own arguments is the first step toward genuine intellectual humility. The risk of becoming a worse citizen, because of philosophy, as Callicles feared, is a real one. It comes from the tendency to get lost in the clouds of theory and lose touch with the reality of human needs and aspirations. But there is a greater risk in not philosophizing at all, the risk of becoming a mindless agent of someone else's dogma. The good citizen is the one who can balance the need for practical action with the duty of moral reflection. This is the true goal of our exploration. Consider how we view the victims of our choices. In the trolley scenario, the victim is a hypothetical, a number, a faceless person on a track. In the real world, victims are people with families, stories, and rights. When we treat them as abstract units in a larger scheme, we are making a moral error. The lesson of the bridge, the horror of the active, personal act of violence, is a reminder that we must always keep the human, individual element in focus, even when we are dealing with mass-scale decisions. This is why the study of history and literature is so crucial to this endeavor. They provide the context and the human stories that abstract theory can miss. They force us to put ourselves in the shoes of those who have been affected by the decisions of the past. They show us that behind every policy, every law, and every political movement, there is a human impact that must be accounted for. We are not just calculating outcomes, we are shaping the fabric of other people's lives. The restlessness of reason is a gift. It is what keeps us from settling for easy, pre-packaged answers. It is what drives us to look beneath the surface of the status quo and ask if we can do better. We should cherish this restlessness. We should welcome the challenges to our thinking. We should seek out the voices and the perspectives that force us to reevaluate our positions. This is how we grow, and this is how we build a more just and compassionate society. We should also reflect on the importance of community in our moral life. We don't think in a vacuum. Our values are shaped by our family, our culture, and our peers. The fact that we have this debate in a classroom with others is significant. It reminds us that morality is not a solitary pursuit, it is a shared project. We learn from each other, we challenge each other, and we support each other as we navigate the complexities of what it means to be good. As we move forward, let us bring this same spirit of inquiry to everything we do. Let us be more aware of the assumptions we make, the values we take for granted, and the impact our decisions have on the people around us. Let us be willing to change our minds when the facts or the arguments demand it. And let us never lose that sense of wonder and curiosity that makes the study of philosophy so profoundly, uniquely human. The ultimate goal is not to find a perfect, error-free life, but to live a life that is intentional and examined. As Socrates famously said, the unexamined life is not worth living. This does not mean we must spend every waking moment in contemplation, but it does mean we should be aware of the why behind our what. We should know why we do what we do, and we should be prepared to defend those reasons to ourselves and to others. This brings us back to the start. The story of the trolley car is not about trains, tracks, or levers. It is about us. It is about the fundamental, inescapable burden of choice. It is about the way we weigh the value of lives, the way we justify our actions, and the way we deal with the unintended consequences of our decisions. It is the story of our own moral evolution, and it is a story that we are still in the process of writing. We have seen that there are no easy answers. We have seen that the attempt to reach for such answers often leads us into deeper, more complicated territory, and we have seen that this is not a sign of failure but a sign of success. By engaging with these problems, we are taking responsibility for our own moral lives. We are moving from the position of passive consumers of morality to active participants in the moral world. In the final analysis, the most powerful tool we have is our ability to think for ourselves. No book, no teacher, and no algorithm can tell you what is right. They can only provide the tools and the context for you to decide for yourself. This is both a massive responsibility and a profound freedom. It is the core of what it means to be an adult in a free society, and it is the foundation upon which all justice is built. So let us keep talking. Let us keep debating. Let us keep testing our principles against the hard reality of our own lives and the lives of those around us. Let us be the ones who refuse to be satisfied with the status quo and who are willing to do the hard, often uncomfortable work of questioning everything. That is the only way to build a world that is not just efficient, but truly deeply and humanly just. We are all the driver of the trolley. We are all the onlooker on the bridge. We are all the doctor in the ER. We are all the healthy patient in the room next door. We are all at various times the judge and the judged. And the more we recognize this shared humanity, the more we can see our own reflections in the faces of those our decisions affect. That empathy is the final piece of the puzzle, the missing link between cold calculation and warm justice. As we conclude this analysis, remember the power of the simple question: what is the right thing to do? It is a question that can change the world if we are brave enough to ask it and even braver enough to live out the answers. The risks are real, the stakes are high, and the path is uncertain. But the reward, the possibility of a more intentional, more moral, and more meaningful life is worth every struggle. Keep questioning, keep debating, and keep looking for the truth wherever it may lead. The restlessness of reason is your most valuable asset, and it is the key to unlocking the true potential of your own moral existence. Do not fear the discomfort of not knowing. Embrace it as the necessary prerequisite for real, lasting wisdom. This is the path of the reflective life, and it is a path that you are now better equipped to walk. Our documentary journey may be ending, but your personal journey is just entering a new phase. Carry these questions with you. Use them to interrogate the world around you. And remember that every decision, no matter how small, is a reflection of who you are and who you want to be. You are the architect of your own moral identity, and you are building it with every single thought, word, and action you take. The trolley is still moving, the world is still watching, and you still have the power to influence the outcome. Never forget that your choices matter, and that your voice is a vital part of the ongoing, never-ending conversation about what it means to be a good person in a complex, often broken world. Continue to seek, continue to strive, and never ever lose the courage to ask the hard questions. That is your duty, your privilege, and your path forward. Everything we have discussed, the math of survival, the sanctity of rights, the weight of direct action, the danger of skepticism, has been a preparation for this moment. The moment when you take the lessons and apply them to your own life. Be the person who is not afraid to think, not afraid to feel, and not afraid to act in the face of uncertainty. That is the true, lasting legacy of our exploration. Thank you for your curiosity, your persistence, and your profound commitment to the pursuit of the good.